Good evening and welcome to Sunday Night Live. And here we are right after Christmas, and we're very delighted and honored to one of our auxiliary bishops of New York being our visitor this evening, Bishop Gerald Walsh. Now I should tell you about Bishop Walsh. I taught him when he was in the seminary, so I've been around a long time.
A couple of years.
Welcome,
nice to be with you. Thank you very much.
Bishop Walsh is now the rector of St. Joseph's Seminary in Yonkers, right where we are broadcasting from.
Up the hill.
But your whole life was another kind of work.
Different. Much different.
You've been here how many years?
I'm here, this is my 4th year here. Before that I was really 28 years full-time in parishes, 13 in Holy Trinity on West 82nd Street, 6 years in Incarnation Parish, Washington Heights, and 9 years in St. Elizabeth's in Washington Heights.
And those parishes are all?
Heavily Hispanic, very nice people, hardworking, making many sacrifices for their children and hoping that the kids will rise up to the next level.
And you yourself studied Spanish?
I studied Spanish for 2 summers at the Catholic University in Ponce, Puerto Rico. It was a wonderful program. We were there for 3 months, 2 months of class, and 1 month in a parish for field work. And that's where you really begin to use the language. Yes. You pick it up in the classroom, but when you're in a situation where day by day you have to speak it, that's where you grow.
And Bishop Walsh speaks very well Spanish.
I'm not grammatically correct, but I can be understood.
All right. And Bishop, we're delighted to have you this evening, right after Christmas. You're a Christmas present.
Sure,
and,
thank you.
We got a number of topics that we would like to hear a Catholic bishop talk about.
Sure.
But we wanted to make you at home. You've been here at the seminary, how many, 5 years?
3.5.
3 years.
3.5.
That was a surprise, wasn't it?
It was more of a shock, but a pleasant one. I found the young men studying here, both for the diocese and for orders like your own, very, very open, very pleasant, very hardworking, very sincere about what they're doing, and they are completely dedicated to the mission of the Church at this time in history. Their focus is on how they can make themselves better representatives of Jesus Christ to the people among whom they will be privileged to serve in the future. So there's a lot of spiritual preparation, a lot of academic preparation, and at the same time they have fieldwork assignments every Wednesday and for 2 months every summer to help them become more familiar with what they'll be doing full-time once they are ordained. And the same goes for the friars of the renewal. They have the assignments in food pantries, homeless shelters, youth groups, and the blend together of the 2 groups is very, very productive, very, very helpful for us.
You know, Bishop, it's been good news that seminaries are growing.
Yeah, it's wonderful news.
Supportingly, right?
You see that here. Our college program, the St. John Neumann Seminary residence, has 51 students this year, 39 of them for the Archdiocese of New York, 7 for the Archdiocese of Washington, 1 or 2 for the friars, and other dioceses are beginning to send them here. The idea being that a solid preparation on the college level will make the theologate much easier. And we have some who have BAs from college already, and they come to get their philosophy, either 1 or 2 years, depending on what they have, where they came from. They're called pre-theologians. And I believe next year there are possibly 6 of them coming into Dunwoody from the Neumann residence. So it's working out very well. Our
audience, of course, includes many dear friends who are non-Catholic.
Of course.
Some are non-Christian. We got a lot of Jewish people write me notes. And they'll all be interested to know that the Catholic seminaries, which were down very low, are now suddenly coming up. In Boston, Philadelphia, they went from about 30 to 90. I was last night in the seminary in Philadelphia and St. Charles, and I was delighted. And one of the interesting things, we have, I hate to say this, but the seminary years ago was Irish American.
Sure.
A few Germans like myself, eventually a few Italians, but the Irish ran the show.
Right.
Now we have a couple of Irishmen, but we have Hispanic, African American, Hispanic from a number of Latin America countries.
We're very happy with that development. It's a tradition, I think, especially among the immigrant groups that see the need for spirituality. They encourage one of their children to become a priest or a religious woman. At the same time, we do have a problem with some of the groups you mentioned earlier. For example, the first month I was rector, I was in a CBS store on Yonkers Avenue, and a woman came over to me and said, "Are you the new rector of the seminary?" I said, "Yes." "Well, please make sure they all speak English." So I said to her, "Well, we're doing that. We help all of our students who are from other countries to become fluent in English. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting accent reduction or proper phrasing of the English language." But I said, "Let me ask you a question. How many of your nieces or nephews or even your grandchildren might be studying to be a priest or a nun?" And the answer was very shocking. "Oh, no, we have to have grandchildren, and they have to make a lot of money for the family." I said, "Well, that's a very poor attitude to have, especially when our tradition has always been all of the groups encourage young people to think about a vocation, not only to church service, but to public service. And that's part of the problem today. Service is not exactly high on the list of priorities for anybody. So, as I said before, we're delighted to have so many young Hispanics coming up from Mexico, from Colombia, a few African Americans coming in here. One will be ordained this year. His home is Tanzania. And they make a wonderful contribution to the universality of the church in New York. New York is a microcosm of the whole world, as you well know from your own experience, your own work in the areas you work in. Everyone's welcome here.
Oh, yes.
Just as the song goes, if you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere.
I've been teaching at St. Joseph's Seminary for 45 years, including yourself,
Me.
Bishop. Yeah, he used to throw spitballs at me.
I missed.
And I've had a wonderful experience at St. Joseph's Seminary, one of the happiest memories of my whole life at the seminary. And I've seen it change and grow and things like that. What is very interesting, the large number of students, either Latin Americans or African American. And that represents the culture and the population.
Well, we're delighted, as I said before, to have them, because if you look at our parishes, for example, the area where I grew up, the Inwood area of Manhattan, Inwood, Washington Heights, was heavily Irish American, heavily Jewish, heavily immigrant at that time. Now, if you look, it's heavily Hispanic, mainly Dominican, but a good number of Mexican families coming in. Puerto Ricans and Cubans had been the majority, but as they went up the ladder economically, when their children married, they moved to suburban areas because the rent was less there. Rent in Manhattan now is through the ceiling. But they take these apartments because they're convenient to get to their jobs. There are schools for their children. Many Catholic schools are there. Heavily, our schools in the Archdiocese of New York are heavily Hispanic in those areas. So they are doing what other immigrant groups did before, coming in, moving into the city areas where they can get into schools, where they can get to work and raise their children, and I'm sure we'll see the same thing.
I think this is also true throughout the United States. Our program is not only to New York, but it filtered into many big cities.
Sure.
Chicago, Los Angeles.
Both of whom are heavily immigrant cities.
Yes. And isn't that the future of the United States like its past?
Sure.
Practically every one of us is a child of the immigration.
Well, to give you an example, I had the pleasure of teaching for 13 years at Cathedral Prep when it was a full high school. I had the junior religion class. I was part-time faculty. So I always asked them in the first class, 30 or 32 young men. I said, how many of you come from immigrant families? And only 3 raised their hand. So I said to them, it's a pleasure to be with so many American Indians. Thank you very much for being here. But I tried to bring out to the point that we all come, as you said before, from an immigrant background, whether it's your grandfather or your father or your great-grandfather, and therefore it's our obligation as well as our opportunity to help make the next group feel as welcome as they can be, because they're here for the same reason.
Yes.
A better life, a better education, and in many cases, the ability to practice your religion, which was not always true where they came from.
I remember many years ago a young priest, and I was working at Children's Village, and I was down in the middle of the poor section of the city, and this man I was talking to had come from Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And I looked around and I said, Puerto Rico is a lovely place. Why did you ever leave there to come here? And he said to me, I want to give my children a chance.
Of course.
That's what my great-grandparents said.
That's what they all did.
When they left Ireland and Alsace.
My own grandparents came from Ireland, and they settled, again, in a number of neighborhoods. And you see the same thing going on now. They move from neighborhood to neighborhood depending on rents, depending on availability of schools, depending on jobs. It was a coincidence. When I was appointed pastor of Incarnation Parish in 1989, my mother had been living in that parish for a year before her own marriage in 1940, but she got married in the church where they had lived most of her young life, Our Lady of Good Counsel. And we see the same today. People coming into a new neighborhood and they have their marriage where they came from because the roots are there. But when they get established where they are, they then adopt the neighboring parish, the local parish, and that's where they focus their activities.
One of the very encouraging things I now, because I worked most of my life with Puerto Rican and Dominican people, mm-hmm. and I asked somebody in Spanish, my broken Spanish, not like your own, where are you from? Mexico.
Uh-huh.
Muchos Mexicanos,
yes,
Trabajadores, Ecuadorianos,
yeah.
Guatemalteca,
uh-huh.
Yes. And it's wonderful. It speaks to what America is to be, what do they call it? The melting pot.
The melting pot.
And that's what we're supposed to be.
And you will find with the Mexicans in particular, as soon as a child is born, bring him to the church, bring her to the church for a blessing.
Now, another interesting thing, as a result of giving retreats years ago to the Maryknoll missionary fathers and brothers, I was in Africa mm-hmm. giving retreats. And now I'm meeting people from Kenya, Tanzania, Liberia, and they're so happy that I have been there.
Oh, sure.
I tell them all about it.
They love it.
Monrovia, Dar es Salaam. And
you establish a relationship by telling people where you've been and what you've been doing.
And see, also I have to say, Bishop, which you don't mind me saying, but my television audience, tough place to live, New York.
Very tough.
I'm not encouraging anybody to live here. Mm-hmm. But if you do live here, you can enjoy it.
And
it's a fascinating
bring your
place.
gifts with you and don't let them be taken away from you. By that I mean your faith, your value to the family, your idea of public service, your idea of being someone who is here to make everything better as much as you can.
Yes.
Sometimes people get overwhelmed and they lose this.
Yes, but I must say, if you want to do good, New York is a great place
to do it.
Start.
A lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities.
Now we're going to have our break now, and so we'll see you in 2 minutes. Well, now, Bishop, here's our audience has a marvelous opportunity to a young priest, basically. You're young,
Thank
so
you.
to speak, and you're a bishop. You
Yeah.
never expected to be a bishop
Never.
in your whole life,
Never.
and working always in the inner city,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you become a bishop. How did you feel?
I felt shocked. I thought when Cardinal Egan asked me to come and see him, I thought he was calling me about the annual Cardinal's Appeal, which I had been helping on. But it was not. It was that the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, had chosen myself and one other to be auxiliary bishops. And I said to Cardinal Egan, I said, this is the furthest thing from my mind. I never expected this, but if this is what the Pope wants, we'll do the best we can. So far it's been very pleasant. One of the very nice things is going around confirming young people, meeting them, their parents, and their sponsors, and having the opportunity to ask them to think about the future. Unfortunately, for many in our secular society, ceremonies such as confirmation or even graduation from a high school or a grammar school, in many cases tends to be goodbye to the church. It's a major mistake. So you try and use those moments of grace, as they would be called, to ask them to think about not just what they're going to do in the secular world, but how they're going to make a spiritual contribution to that world, which they can only do if they have a strong spirituality themselves, a practice of the faith, attending Mass on Sunday, listening to the homily, taking some time during the week to do some spiritual reading, and asking yourself, after you read something, what does this mean to the way I live my life? Unfortunately, the role models of our society today are not what they were when I was growing up. We always admired athletes such as Stan Musial, Red Shandy, before my time, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and the Yankees. Unfortunately, there seems to be a tendency today to stress the financial and leave out the religious part of these lives, and not just in athletics, but across the board. We need to get a return to the basics of our society. Our society, our country, was founded for freedom of, not freedom from, religion. And until we get that back, we're not going to be as strong as we could be, as we were, and as we should be. So that's one of the highlights of my life at the moment, having the opportunity, especially at confirmation masses, to try and encourage young people to do the right thing, to use the gifts of the Holy Spirit and make a difference.
Well, now here's an interesting word, Bishop, this word secular. First of all, years ago, a diocesan priest was called a secular priest,
right,
as distinct from a religious order priest. So here was a word that was a perfectly appropriate word, although I always refer to those priests as diocesan priests. I was always uncomfortable with the word secular. However, those of you who remember Latin, remember we said our prayers, per omnia saecula saeculorum, for the ages of the ages. So the word secular is a perfectly good word, but in a tangential way, it means secular, removed from religion. And that's an unfortunate thing.
See, this is one of the benefits of a season like this. We're just celebrating Christmas. We're looking forward to a new year. Today we're celebrating the Holy Family. I would hope not only Catholics, but everyone of goodwill would take a look at himself or herself at this particular time. Next week is the beginning of a calendar year. Many people used to make resolutions how they could improve their lives in the next year. And if they would do that and think not of how much more money they might make or how much more gifts they might receive, but how much more can I develop my personality? How much more aware can I become of the needs of the people around me? How much of a contribution can I make to those who have less than I do? It was a very sad thing. A few months ago, there was a couple of baseball players arguing with through their agents with the teams they played for about how many millions of dollars they were going to make for the next year playing baseball. And one of the local papers had a cartoon of 2 or 3 people online at the unemployment office hoping to get a job, and one says to the other, too bad about so-and-so, he's only making $20 million next year.
Yeah.
Our society, the values are upside down. Our health care is not what it should be. We're losing hospitals. Our educational system is not what it could and should be. Our family structure is weak. Our care for the elderly who are at home, I know this from my 15, 16 years in Washington Heights. Time magazine many years ago did a survey on the elderly in New York, and they found a high percentage of elderly women in particular living alone in that neighborhood with less money than they needed for a decent way of life. They did not have enough money for a proper diet, so in some cases they were eating cat food, which is the reason why in that particular area, North Manhattan, called Washington Heights Inwood, you see so many active now senior citizen centers. These were created by the city to give people of the senior age group a place to go during the day for socialization, just to be with someone and not sitting home all day long watching television or listening to the radio. They were also given the chance to see a doctor once a month who would come, or a dentist, and they would come pro bono. And their life's expectancy improved, and as did the quality of their life. And you can see the need in that neighborhood for this because there are 2 huge nursing homes there, both of them full, well over 1,000 people in the 2 of them. So my hope is that all of us, not just Catholics, but all of us will take this happy time of the year when people seem to be filled with the Spirit, to sit down and say, what can I do in this coming calendar year to make better use of my own gifts and become more aware of the needs of those around me, whether it's my family, my friends, my coworkers, my neighbor in my building. Who needs my help and how can I give it? And I think we would all grow if that happened.
It's a very interesting thing for me to notice that because Christians make a lot of noise about Christmas, I hope they all get to church.
Oh, yeah.
But it's now seen other people, Jewish people, Muslim people, they have made it a point to celebrate a holiday of their own.
Sure.
And I think that's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
I'm delighted.
And I hope the same that I said for the Christians, the Catholics, is for them. I have many wonderful Jewish friends from my time in Washington Heights. They're very, very dedicated. There's a rabbi who works in the major hospital there, medical center, beside running his own synagogue. And he's very, very fine. There's a fellow on his board who goes around visiting homebound elderly Jewish women. So no matter what faith you are, every faith tells us to be aware of the needs of our neighbor, to be aware of what our God, whatever you want to call him, has given us, and our obligation to share some of that with those who have less than we do. And above all, we ought to find things that unite us. The interfaith movement could be stronger.
Yes, it could.
The ecumenical movement could be stronger. If we focused on the areas where we agree, we would find much more than we find in the areas where we disagree. And you build on consensus. This is a time in history where the sacred needs to be restored to its prominent place.
What is this real tragedy in American life is the ecumenical movement was very, very strong in the 70s, the 60s, especially in the 60s. And I was a young priest, and I loved ecumenism. I preached sometime in the 60s and early 70s, 200 times in Protestant churches and 100 times in synagogues, and had very, very positive experiences. And then, unfortunately, pulled the rug out from under us by abortion.
Yeah.
Because, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, a number of other denominations permit abortion. They're not pro-life. And the ecumenical movement disappeared. And that was a very sad thing.
At the same time, though, it's a good sign to see so many people beginning to realize the value of life. The march we go to every year in Washington attracted more and more young people in the last couple of years. And there's more and more young people getting involved in the political arena who are pro-life, not just the abortion issue, but pro-life all the way through. And it's very, very important to be consistent, but all of the other causes that they work for, if you don't protect life in the very beginning, when it's starting, those causes are secondary.
It's encouraging in recent years going to the pro-life march. Now with having been hit by a car, I can't march, but I sit on the corner and wave to the crowd when they go by. And there's several times there are Jewish organizations and Protestant organizations, and I saw one group of Muslims, all for life.
The golden rule, that every major religion has that, covers the life issues. It's very unfortunate that abortion is mainly a billion-dollar industry supported by people whose interest is financial and receiving the support of political people because they depend on them for campaign contributions. We don't want to get into the church versus state issue here, but Catholic people have an obligation to follow the teaching of the church on life. And no excuse could eliminate that, as far as I can see. We have to be consistent, we have to be firm, we have to be fair. Life begins when life begins, and as Catholics who believe in what the Church has been teaching from the days of the Didache, way, way back, our obligation is to protect life at all stages.
The Didache is like the commands of the Church, incorporating the Ten Commandments and the Christian life.
Sure.
It would be the 2nd century or so.
And we could even quote Thomas Jefferson and Hubert Humphrey, neither of whom are Catholic. The moral quality of a nation can be seen in how it treats the elderly, how it treats those who are in trouble with their developmental challenges, and how it treats those who are at the beginning of life. Two non-Catholic public figures saying the same thing we're saying.
One of the sensitive areas here is about the fact that a very large proportion of children who are aborted are African American. I walked into a big hospital in the middle of Harlem. I won't identify the hospital. And across the entrance, inside, which was the 2nd floor, 2-story, was a big banner, and it said, "Abortion is the murder of Afro-American." And it was a group of African-American doctors, their organization.
One time we had a black vice chancellor in the Archdiocese of New York whose main responsibility was to try and educate her people about what was happening to them, and they called it black genocide. And that's what it is.
An appallingly number of African-American babies.
And when you think of the contributions that could have been given to society had those children been allowed to be born and live normal lives, look at the wonderful contributions we're already getting from the African Americans in this country, and double that if you let all those other children be born and have a normal life.
And you know, people don't realize it. It's an assault on the providence of God. God alone gives us life. A human being has an immortal soul only from God. And I was talking years ago in Children's Village. A little youngster said to me, he knew that he had no real family, hardly even knew his mother. And he said, "I'm an accident. The only thing is I'm an accident." And I said, "Jose, nobody is an accident. God gave you your life." And I'm happy that his name is not Jose, but he's Hispanic. he's done very well in life, very beautifully. So, you know, what is the Catholic position? To speak for life. And I will not put up any people bellyaching about us.
I remember Cardinal O'Connor saying that if you're going to accuse me of being a one-issue person, and that one issue is protect life, fine.
Go ahead.
Accuse me. Go right ahead.
We have another break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Now, before I go back to my good friend Bishop Walsh, I do want to mention that next week our broadcast is on the shrine of the North American martyrs, the Jesuit martyrs who were killed at Auriesville or other places in the United States and Canada. But the shrine is at Auriesville. And Elizabeth Lynch, who is the manager of the museum there, will be joining us. And I hope all of you know what Auriesville is. It was the place of St. Isaac Jogues, St. Rene Goupil, who were killed there, and a number of other North American Jesuits martyrs. So we'll have pictures on our program, and it will be very interesting. If you haven't been to Auriesville, you should be there. Now, Bishop, where are we going to go from there?
Well, we can solve all the problems of the world.
Oh, yes, well, bishops do that all the time.
They do that all the time. Not always successfully, but we try.
And now, in your present situation, you're rector of a seminary. And seminaries are growing. Amazingly, in the United States, there's been a loss of seminarians for the last 10 or 15 years.
15 years, yeah.
And now they're going up. I understand that in Philadelphia and St. Charles Seminary, Boston, St. John's, they're gone from 30 to 90 seminarians. And New York is going to be following right along.
Many of the newcomers are from immigrant families in other countries. Their bishops, realizing how many of their own people have moved here without clergy, are happily releasing them to study here and knowing that they will be incarnate, as we say, or joined to the Archdiocese of New York. And some of them are not young. They're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they have come to the religious life because they were not totally satisfied with their secular jobs. There's something missing. We have a former policeman studying to be Archdiocese of New York. A former accountant, ordained last year, was a young man who had run his own business from Argentina. So the Spirit works in different people at different times. Our opportunity here, our responsibility as a faculty, is to help that development grow, to encourage it. We talk about 4 pillars of formation here. Spiritual, of course, it's very, very important. Human, intellectual, and pastoral. They're not separate. The spiritual one is the most important because without spiritual life, everything else you do would not be as strong as it could and should be. But human formation is very important, how you get along with people of different backgrounds, people of different ages, people of different abilities. Pastoral, the pastoral formation involves 2 months every summer in a parish, which is wonderful because that's where they see the reality of what parish life is. But it also involves every Wednesday going to different apostolic works. For example, 2 of our students go to a prison where they interact with people who are in there for anywhere from 5 to 20 years. Some go to teach high school religion classes. Others go to hospitals, Calvary Hospital in the Bronx, a world-famous hospital. St. Joseph's here in Yonkers, a very nice, well-run hospital. Others go to universities. 4 or 5 stay here to run programs for children being confirmed. It's a retreat program. That's important not only for the children, but also for the students to get to know how to deal with teenagers today. Teenagers are always difficult to deal with, not because they want to be, but that's just part of the process. And once you can get a relationship going with a priest or a deacon or a seminarian, you're halfway home. And we find it's very good practice. From all accounts, the schools who send them are happy with our services. And I have encouraged the students, where possible, if you're invited to a confirmation in a parish where you serve in the summer or where you're taught religious education, if that invitation does not conflict with your academic obligations, please go. It's good for you, it's good for them. It's good for the students to see you, and it's good for you to see them. So there are a lot of different ways we can encourage vocations. We have a very fine vocation program here. Father Luke Sweeney is the director. Father Louis Saldana works with him, especially in Hispanic vocations. He's the rector of our college program. He's Mexican himself. He's been here now 6 or 7 years in the faculty. And each month there is a group from high school, different high schools, public and Catholic. They come for a weekend, Friday night to Sunday afternoon. It's well structured, it's spiritual, it's intellectual in the sense that they do their homework, and it's some time in recreation in the gymnasium, in the pool. A lot of time in prayer, a holy hour, Mass, prayers before and after meals. The final day, the parents are invited to come for lunch. It's important if you can get the parents on board because, as I mentioned before, the support from the parents and the grandparents is not as great as it had been in earlier ages for a lot of different reasons. So our vocation team works very, very well. Our students are very, very helpful, welcoming these young high school people, and we'll see where it goes. Some of them have come into the college program.
A rather delicate subject. I'm almost avoiding it because I didn't want to offend anyone. But when I was 14 years old, I was working as a teenager in the home, the mother house of the Dominican sisters in the town of Caldwell. And I was walking down the hill, and right in front of me was the street on which African American people lived. It was not a slum, but it was segregated. And there was a little church of Christ in God, God in Christ, a little black church, and I went home on that street. And I made up my mind I would never in my whole life be part of racial segregation. Never. I was very blessed when I went to high school, a Catholic high school. A number of students were African American. Some of one became a nun. First black sister in her order. And it was so important to me. And Catholics at those times had a devotion to St. Martin de Porres, Dominican brother, a mulatto, coming from Lima, Peru, and everybody loved San Martin. The Spanish people call him Fray Escoba, Brother Broom, because he's often showed.
Many churches have a statue
of St. Martin
with the broom.
Yes, and so when I looked around, I wanted to join an order that was working with poor people, and all these years, I've had very beautiful experiences in my life with the African American community. There was a time when the 70s, the African American community, many people had become very angry, expressed their anger about how they had been treated very badly. I understood that. But when I was there and someone would say something, anger to me, I'd very quietly talk to them and tell them I'm here. That's why I'm here in Harlem. And you know, they melted.
I think if you take as one of your mottos, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and understand what that means, a lot of this disappears. I had the wonderful opportunity to go to a high school in New York City run by the then called the Irish Christian Brothers. Now it's the Confraternity of Christian Brothers. The school was Powell Memorial Academy on West 61st Street. It had been a hospital before it became a high school. And our principal in our senior year was born in the building. So, but the mix there was Irish American, Italian American, Hispanics, African American, Chinese, from all over the city, because the subways all somehow get into 59th Street. It's a 2-block walk from the high school. None of us really adverted to the fact that they were different groups. We just called each other by name. I find that children are less inclined to be divisive as far as their ethnic background as some of the parents are. That's not one of the better things to teach. To teach, the best thing to teach is we're all members of one family, the one human family. Cardinal Cook, for many, many years, always spoke to us about God's one human family. And he didn't go into any differentiation of color or age or any of these other, what I would call artificial divisions our society makes, for good or for bad. So one Lord, one faith, one baptism, that means an awful lot. And if you put that into the way you live your life, a lot of these racial things disappear. We still have it. I'm sorry to say there is a group in this area that likes to call part of Washington Heights by another name, Hudson Heights. This does not exist in any map. It does not exist in anyone's mind except those hoping to raise rents. And when you raise rents, who has to leave? The middle class and the poor. If you're going to go along with that mentality, Hudson Heights mentality, you are, first of all, forgetting about the historical role played by Washington Heights in the American Revolution, and you are, in effect, denying the Catholic Church's teaching on the equality of all people, regardless of their color or their ethnic background. And when I say these, I said this at a Mass. I was the pastor of that parish when this stuff started, and I said to them, we are Catholic. We cannot say that it's better to have rich white people in the neighborhood and less African American, less Hispanic. That's not the way we live. And we have to say these things. We have to be public about this. We have to start saying we must do something about the inequality we find in the way society spends its money. A few weeks ago, I was in a delicatessen here in Yonkers, and the lady in front of me was spending $58 on the various types of lotto tickets. $58 is a lot of money on lotto tickets. And I felt like saying to her, do you belong to any church in the area? Do you help any group in the area with the type of money you're spending here? So it's a problem we have to face. But we can't face it till we admit that it's there. And if you're going to deny that there's a race problem in the Northeast, you're never going to solve it.
For someone who was very interested in interracial things, I belonged to the Interracial Council of the Catholic Church, was run by a Jesuit father, a white priest, but that was goes way back 40 or 50 years ago.
Sure.
And I would have dreamed that we would have an African-American president. Unfortunately, I'm very disappointed the policies of the president, particularly as regards to life. And I'm very disappointed, and I pray that he may change his mind, may have a conversion, because he was very much influenced by Catholics in Chicago, and particularly Cardinal Stritch, was man way ahead of his times on social justice. But I'm disappointed in the president. But I'm waiting to get an African-American president. But what about an African pope? It's a very real possibility.
I remember watching the afternoon of the election of Pope John Paul II, and the announcer was so stunned, he didn't know where the man came from when he announced the new pope's name. They announced it as the first African-American pope. And 15 minutes later, they had to correct it when they found out that John Paul was from Poland. And but your point is well taken. The church is growing very, very rapidly in Africa. All of Africa, certain parts of South America, Vietnam. I had the honor of saying a funeral mass for a Vietnamese priest who worked here in Manhattan a year ago, and there were 23 other Vietnamese priests concelebrating that funeral, all of whom were working in this area of the world. So the church is growing in those areas. I think people who have little or nothing realize the value of the spiritual part of their lives. They're encouraging their children, and the children are following through. But there are several African cardinals who were mentioned as possible popes before Pope Benedict was elected. So you never know. The Spirit is not going to sit down and take a poll. What should we do today? No. What happens, happens.
And you know, they're the old established people, the Irish, the Italians, the Slavs, and the Poles. They were the people who built the American Catholic Church.
Right.
There were other countries. There were English Catholics, there were English Catholics, and other countries, French, but those were the large groups of people. And I'm part of that.
Sure, so am I.
So am I.
Sure.
But wouldn't it be interesting, though, in our lifetime, to see an African?
Oh, I think so. I think it would prove the universality of the church. It would encourage the people who are already working and praying very hard for vocations to continue that, and it might wake up the rest of the population. You know, we have an obligation to push the spiritual part of our lives. So much of success today is measured by how much money do you make, how many lives do you control through your work. But I have a saying up in my room at the seminary that I found in a paper years ago. It says something to the effect that 100 years from now, it will not matter at all how much money I had in the bank, what type of house did I own, how many material possessions did I have. What will matter is, did I have a positive effect on the life of a child? Did I help that child become a better human being by my spending time with him or her, by encouraging him or her to do the best they could in their different works? So I think we have to take a long view and realize we could, I say this at confirmation masses, I talk about vocations at the very end. The 4 vocations: the marriage vocation, the vocation to the single life, the vocation to the religious life, the vocation to the priesthood, and the permanent diaconate. When we talk about marriage, I just say to them, we do not marry someone because of what he or she looks like or because of the money they may or may not have. 30 years from now, you're going to look different. Your material possessions may be gone, your money may be gone, so you have to find common values, you have to find a spiritual connection, and you build on that. It's the same thing with encouraging young people to do whatever they're going to do in their life. Encourage them to use the gifts of the Spirit along with their other gifts. How can they make a contribution that will be lasting to society? So we hope that that's what's going on.
And we're certainly praying, Bishop, that by God's grace we will be able to do that. Bishop, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you. Bishop, give us a tiny, quick prayer.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Let us pray. As we begin a new calendar year in a few days, We ask the Lord's Spirit to be with us, to help us to see the needs of the people around us, to be grateful for the gifts we have received, and to be willing to share them with those who are less than we do. And we ask this as we ask all things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
And today we want, as we always do, ask you to support EWTN. It's holiday time. Cheer up my dear friend, Mother Angelica. She is not able to speak with us or appear on the program except with done in the past. But happy Christmas and blessed New Year to you, Mother. And please, if you can, send a little check into EWTN in honor of Mother Angelica. God bless.
Amen.